Their work can mean the difference between life and death. It's not just how they do it, who does it matters too. Opening day, it's all about hope. A dedicated group of Rockies fans wants that to be true for a friend's family, even in the most difficult of times. A Coloradan who serves spoke out about social justice and police reform. Now the fight is whether he can be punished for it. And summer jawline season is coming up with the mask mandate expected to drop, but not in Denver right away. City made an announcement today. All that is next. Colorado's nurses have every right to be patting themselves on the back for the service that they have provided the people of this state for the last year. Yet they are also currently taking a hard look at their ranks, a top-down scrutiny of their lack of diversity. Nurses say it is costing lives and proper health care for some patients. Here's Anusha Roy with a look at what they're doing to address the problem.
The Colorado Center for Nursing Excellence, a workforce center, is up front. There is a problem. The demographics don't reflect people who live here.
From a nursing standpoint, we're still looking at probably 90% of the RNs in the state are white women.
If we don't begin to focus on health equity and positive health outcomes for all people, people are going to continue to die.
The center has been working on the issue for years, and now their efforts are reinvigorated for a couple of reasons.
With COVID, we know that we really saw health disparities in our communities of color.
The opportunity for us to look at bias within our systems, within us as individuals, because we all have bias.
If this person looked different, would I be treating them differently? And that's a hard, cold reality for people in healthcare to look in the eye. But we have to do it.
So it's working on improving the pipeline, starting with supporting kids in school who are interested in healthcare, mentoring minority students and first-generation college students, to focusing on retention once people are hired and diversifying leadership.
You give better care when you have connection.
The center is also working with hospital systems like Children's Hospital Colorado that has long been doing this work.
The staff, if you compare it to sort of statewide census, is fairly close. I think our goal, however, is to look at it more along the lines of what do our patient population look like. But I can tell you we've got some work to do.
Now it's adding more to its program.
Our Captains of Inclusion program, and then our Black Health Initiative.
And it's not just for nurses, but across the board.
We see every day how healthcare is not getting it right and hasn't historically gotten it right for certain groups in our country and in our communities, and we want to do better.
So the center and the nurses today, they were talking about how getting good data has been really difficult when it comes to specific demographics and the stats for them to track. And a lot of time it's kind of just being piecemeal together, either through surveys or anecdotally what they're hearing from different hospital systems. And so, Kyle, they were saying one of the things that the center is really trying to do is try to streamline that and get better data so that they understand the big picture even better.
And they're talking about looking years into the future about who could eventually be joining their workforce.
Yeah, they brought up that pipeline a lot today that they want to improve. And I mean, they're saying that can start as early as maybe even middle school or high school as students are showing some interest in healthcare. They said it's so important, you know, to nurture that interest in STEM and keep that going because that can then build into that future workforce.
All right, Anusha Roy, thank you very much. Denver's mask mandate is going to run through at least early May, and then the city's going to decide whether to continue it on a month-by-month basis. We learned that today. City's staking out a plan ahead of when the statewide mask mandate expires on Saturday. We do know the governor's office told our Steve Stager last night following our program that the governor's going to extend the statewide mask mandate another 30 days, but then they said they're going to modify that extension. Cut it off early? Unclear. Nearly 17.5% of our neighbors in Colorado have completed the vaccination process, while 11.5% of the population is waiting on a second dose of Pfizer or Moderna. 12% of the state population too young to get the vaccine. They're represented in gray, as you asked for and received. Clinical trials in kids do look promising. There are 326 people currently hospitalized with COVID-19 in our state. That is up 6 patients from yesterday. If it's not clear by now, we have reached this just sticky point where people are coming into the hospital with really serious cases of COVID as fast as hospitals are able to get people out to home or to rehab. Hospitalizations have been in that plateau for weeks. Our positivity rate has had 2 normal days now after 2 high spikes. It was at 4.2% yesterday. Our 7-day moving average is 4.5%, so it's climbing. It remains, for now, where public health experts say it's manageable. At this moment, there are friends, family, and community members who are celebrating the life of one of the King Soopers employees killed in last week's shooting. Ricky Olds was driven to succeed in life. That's what her family says. She's working her way up the ladder at the King Soopers off Table Mesa in Boulder. She was bright in more ways than one. She was one of those can't-miss personalities. Ricky was 25 years old. A remembrance service open to the public continues until 9 o'clock tonight at Chris Mortuary in Boulder. There is a celebration of life, also open to the public, next Wednesday at Boulder Valley Christian Church. The right to peaceably assemble, the right to protest, is at the core of the First Amendment. Military service members protect and defend that right, yet they don't always get to benefit from it. Our Marshall Zellinger explains why the Colorado Army National Guard is being sued over the right to protest. A third day of relatively calm and peaceful protests against police brutality.
Saturday, May 30th, a daytime protest at the Capitol, hours before the city's first 8 p.m. curfew.
I walked a few blocks from my home in North Capitol Hill.
Alan Kennedy, who you might remember as an elector for President Joe Biden, is also a captain and judge advocate with the Colorado National Guard, serving a couple weeks in the summer and 2 days a month.
You lose your constitutional rights the other 28 days.
And we are away and running on night 3.
Denver's Independent Monitor would be critical of the actions of Denver police on this night and the days before and after. So was Kennedy when he wrote this column entitled, "Getting Tear Gassed While Protesting Gave Me Hope." The end of his column included a disclaimer that revealed he's a captain in the Colorado Army National Guard and that the views expressed are his own. The column led to an investigation by the Colorado Army National Guard. There are times when a military member's First Amendment rights can be restricted. They are not allowed to participate in demonstrations off-post if they're on duty, in a foreign country, it constitutes a breach of law and order, violence is likely to result, or if they're in uniform.
I protested in a purely personal capacity. I was in civilian clothes, wearing a face mask, not in uniform. I was not on orders and not on duty.
The investigating officer determined Kennedy did not engage in political activities in violation of any Army regulations, but the commanding officer reprimanded Kennedy because violence was likely to occur.
Trying to figure out if violence is likely to result is an impossible standard. I'm being targeted for participating in a Black Lives Matter protest.
He appealed, and the Colorado Army National Guard Chief of Staff denied it, writing in part, "Any reasonable person should have concluded that violence was likely to result. What if you had been arrested? What if you had been seriously injured during the rioting, even through no fault of your own? What would be the public relations implications for the force if you had been accused of rioting?"
Ironically, the only evidence that the Colorado National Guard has that I was even there are my own op-eds.
So couldn't you participate and just not write about it and be in the clear?
That's not who I am.
So why does it matter? Why sue? According to Kennedy, reprimands and negative evaluations could lead to not being promoted, which means loss of pay. And now he says his own fear, like he can't attend protests on his own time without being reprimanded for it.
Marshall, I think a lot of people might have mistaken impressions of what exactly is allowed in terms of free speech rights and employment under Colorado law.
I mean, just in general, just think of, everybody knows of like shouting fire in a crowded theater, and I think that's an old example, but you can't say certain things even with your First Amendment rights, fighting words, obscenities, incitement, like saying, hey, let's go incite at the Capitol is not going to be something you're protected by, perhaps. You can go and be arrested for it or face charges. There are times where you cannot say certain things depending on the outcome.
Violence is likely to occur. I keep playing that over and over in my head because we know the vast majority of those protests were peaceful, but he was out there on one of those nights where they had a couple of rough nights in a row. All right, Marshall, thank you. So wolves are coming to Colorado. You know that. Voters approved that. Quite controversial. Now, how to pay for the reintroduction. I do not know how much a wolf costs. I assume there are also other financial aspects to this program as well. Anyway, Democrat from the Front Range and a Republican from the Western Slope have a bipartisan idea on how the state should be paying for wolf reintroduction. I point out the bipartisan and bi-slopiness of the plan because we have told you about the figurative and literal divide on this issue. It was largely voters from the Front Range, urban areas, that overruled fewer votes from the rural areas of Colorado where the wolves are actually going to be introduced. The bill that passed an early test unanimously at the state capitol today does not put the burden, like so many wildlife programs, on hunters and anglers, like on license fees. Instead, it would pull money for wolf reintroduction out of species conservation funds and wildlife restoration funds, as well as some money from the state's general fund. Colorado's inmates who help this state fight wildfires while they're incarcerated could soon have a better opportunity to become firefighters once they are released and rejoining society. We have talked about this issue before. State House just passed a Senate bill that would make this more possible. You have this issue where people get out of prison with the training that they have received on how to be wildland firefighters, yet they cannot get hired to do that work on the outside because they were in prison. The bill would provide career training as part of their training while on the inside, and then tell the state's fire division not to disqualify a candidate simply because they served time. That's now headed to the governor for his signature. A new ID system was supposed to help speed up Coloradans' unemployment benefits. For some people, it just means hours more on hold. You'll have no patience for that, or for this. Who is out doing this to our outdoors? It's Not How You Colorado, and it's next. Sorting through the mountains of fraud to find the actual Coloradans who need unemployment help has been really tough on the state's unemployment department. They're hoping that a new-ish system is going to make that process easier, though we've been hearing from a number of you that have had additional trouble signing up for this ID.me. It's a third-party identification verification system. The state's using it. The idea is that once you've been verified through ID.me, the state will always know that you are who you say you are, and that should help cut down on fraud. It's the fraud that slows down the problem. Though we hear from you that you've now run into long wait times with ID.me, as in like 5 hours trying to get your identification verified. The issue appears to be the ID.me trusted referee interface. It's like this live video tool that helps people who've been unable to complete the process on their own.
There are long wait times for ID.me. They are growing rapidly. Other states have been coming on board and utilizing their services at this point in time. So we try to post when we thought the best times were to contact ID.me. However, right now, their wait times tend to be consistently lengthy at this point in time. And that's due to the high volume of fraud being experienced across the country and the need for the identity verification in those additional partner states.
The state estimates 15% of the people in the system are using that trusted referee video tool. ID.me is supposed to be adding staff and resources to meet the increased demand. If you're in the unemployment system and you don't have access to a computer or a smartphone in order to sign up for ID.me, the state is recommending that you contact them at the phone number on the bottom of your screen. I cringe at the thought of even suggesting that somebody wades into the state unemployment phone lines. We know how that's going, but if you don't have a computer, this is the way to get identification verification. 303-536-5615. Everybody is so excited to get back out to life lately. We are seeing some Not How You Colorado behaviors going on. Campfire and Coors, absolutely How You Colorado, but not when you leave it unattended at 11 Mile State Park. Park employees say this fire jumped the fire pit. That could have been bad, even with some snow on the ground. Luckily, they got to it early. Campers were cited, could face a fine of up to $750. Poor 11 Mile, just getting worked over by people who don't know how to Colorado. Somebody's off-road adventure could leave a mark out there for years. Park workers say doing that could also cause drainage issues.
On Friday, when we found out the Ryan had passed, he said, you know, there is nothing good about this day, but this community, Rocky's Twitter, is undefeated.
The ball club this season may not be terrific. The fan base is exceptional. uniting to take care of one fan's family this opening day. Next. Twitter can be a toxic place for a whole mess of reasons. I mean, you got politics, you got the fact that it's just an outrage generator, but even sports on Twitter can just be nasty sometimes. Yet Twitter is also a place where sports can help build community, help fans get through losing season after losing season in playoff droughts. And here on opening day, Rockies fans are using social media to remember a friend they knew online by rallying around his family.
I think it says the most about someone like him that so few of us actually met him in person and interacted with him, and we're still so crushed over losing him.
If you've never been a part of an online family, it's hard to explain how losing someone you've only spoken with 280 characters at a time can feel so personal.
When you're a fan and you connect with fans who are like you, there's something that transcends just a general friendship.
Tyler Maughan and Ryan Bloom never interacted in the real world, but when Maughan found out that a guy who's been along for the ride since his Rockies podcast started passed away, the loss hit hard.
He was so smart, and he was so funny, and he was just a combination of all of the stuff that we love about it.
Their last 280 character conversation was about a meme Bloom created. Someone else in their Twitter family said Maughan should turn it into a shirt.
And Ryan responded to that tweet and said, you can absolutely have this design in exchange for one extra large.
When he sent the final product to Bloom, Maughan expected a response. The silence was deafening.
Somebody who was so full of life in every way that, could be conveyed across the weird chasm of social media. And then all of a sudden to just see that silence was so shocking.
Before Bloom passed away, the plan was to sell a handful of shirts to their online family. Now, Bloom's last gift to Rocky's Twitter is paying it forward to the real-life family he left behind.
Everything that we make from this shirt is going to go to Ryan's family. We're less than a week removed, and we're closing in on $3,000 raised for his family.
Their interactions were only 280 characters at a time, but now the impact of those words is easy to see. For Next, I'm Brian Wendland.
The voice and pictures of our Brian Wendland there. This article on 9news.com explains how folks can still help Brian's family. Finding another way to use your snowboard without ever dealing with I-70 traffic. It's the most Colorado thing we saw today. That and your feedback next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is somebody who decided to go boarding in the city. Lisa was at Dove Valley Recreational Park in Centennial for her son's soccer practice when she saw kiteboarders in the snow. Imagine you got to get those runs in quickly because this was a 70-degree day. Now, you combine soccer and kiteboarding, and you might just have a new extreme sport. Jennifer Sue says, thank you for the story on disparities in health care for people of color in Colorado. Grateful Colorado nurses are acknowledging the need for better representation. Representing the communities you serve is a requirement and responsibility of every industry and of every business in it. Mark says, show's looking a little rocky tonight.